They don't want you to know this. But this file wasn't banned because it was dangerous. It was banned because it worked. One session with this method exposed more than a decade of talk therapy. It didn't heal gently. It ripped the illusions out by force. People walked in broken and walked out awakened, cold, still, and changed. That's why it disappeared. Not because it was false, but because it was too true. A private note from the last facility that tested it said, "Subject collapsed, speechless, claimed he saw himself from the outside." Then silence. The project was buried. But now it's here. And once you hear what it does, you won't sleep the same again. Welcome to the protocol they were afraid you'd find. Let's pull the curtain back. You were never meant to become whole. From the moment you showed signs of struggle, they taught you not how to understand your pain, but how to outsource it. You were trained to depend on therapists who rephrase your words but never reveal your roots, on books that circle your wounds without ever cutting them open, on systems that profit off your numbness and name it progress. You think they want you better? They want you manageable, functioning just enough to go to work, broken just enough to keep buying. The healing industry is not built on breakthroughs. It's built on subscriptions, emotional ones, weekly sessions, ongoing support, repeat affirmations. But the truth? You were never supposed to stay stuck this long. Because the real cure isn't pretty. It isn't polite. It doesn't ask you to talk it out. It forces you to face what you buried. That's what this protocol was designed to do. Not to help you cope, but to confront. 1 hour with this, and it unhooks your mind from the programs it didn't know it was running. It shows you how much of you was never yours to begin with. That kind of power, it can't be sold in sessions. So instead of promoting it, they erased it. Because if enough people woke up, the whole structure would collapse. But you're not here for comfort. You're here because something inside you already knows the system is lying. And now, you're ready to see how deep that lie goes. They didn't name it lightly. It was called the mirror file because it doesn't show you a better version of yourself. It shows you the one you buried. This isn't meditation. This isn't journaling. This isn't a morning routine you post online. It's a confrontation. 1 hour, one file, one locked room, no phones, no distractions, no safe words. Just you, your mind, and what's hiding in it. Developed by a renegade clinical psychologist who left the formal system after calling it emotionally predatory, the mirror file was part of an unauthorized cognitive isolation project used on war-traumatized patients. Instead of soothing, it disrupts. It uses a chain of cognitive mirror loops, carefully layered verbal sequences that bypass your defenses and force the subconscious to speak in images, flashes, and truths you've never allowed yourself to process. Childhood conditioning, parental programming, scripts inherited from pain. The file doesn't just ask questions, it pulls answers out of you. One subject described it like this: "It felt like someone else was inside my head, but it was just me, unedited." Another, "It said a phrase I haven't heard since I was 9 years old, and I remembered everything." It's not designed to make you calm. It's designed to make you clear. And once that clarity hits you, it doesn't leave. This file doesn't fix you. It shows you what was never broken. You think you're one person. You're not. You are two, the one who speaks, and the one who whispers, the one who performs, and the one who remembers. Psychologists tried to name this split for decades. Ego and shadow, conscious and subconscious. But the mirror file didn't use academic labels. It simply called them the surface self and the programmed self. The surface self is who you show the world. Polite, composed, rational. But the programmed self? That's the one who flinches when someone raises their voice. who sabotages when things get too good, who still reacts like the child who wasn't protected. Most people spend their entire lives defending the surface, while never realizing the programmed self is actually in control. You don't overthink because you're broken. You overthink because your mind is trying to decode memories you were never allowed to process. You don't self-sabotage because you're lazy. You sabotage because you were trained to avoid joy before it disappears. The mirror file doesn't just introduce you to that inner version. It makes you feel what they feel. The moment you hear their voice inside you, not as a metaphor, but as a real, trembling, trapped self, you realize you were never your thoughts. You were someone underneath them, screaming to be heard. And now, you finally will. The mirror file didn't come from a lab. It came from a forgotten wing of a military trauma clinic, shut down in the early 90s. Officially, the clinic was designed to treat acute battlefield dissociation. Unofficially, it was the test bed for something much deeper, a protocol that could collapse false identities in under 1 hour. It started with a report. 1992. Author redacted. Subject entered isolated room at 0900 hours. Verbal trigger sequence initiated. Subject went silent at 1842. Physical stillness, pupil dilation, tear production. Repeating one sentence, I remember now. That was the first version. They ran the test 6 more times. 2 subjects walked out trembling. One asked to be institutionalized, not out of fear, but because, as he said, I saw the moment I disappeared. Age 5, it's still happening. Another refused to speak for 48 hours. When he finally did, all he said was, that voice wasn't mine, but it was inside me, waiting. After the 7th subject, the project was shut down. The facility emptied, files redacted. Only a single post-it left behind in the case archives, handwritten in red ink. Subject collapsed, saw too much. They said it was too risky, too unpredictable, too unexplainable. But what they really meant was, it worked too fast. It showed people what they weren't supposed to see. The file was burned, but a backup survived, smuggled out by one of the technicians. They leaked the transcript to an underground cognition forum in 2004. The thread was titled, If You Read This, You Won't Be the Same. That thread vanished within 24 hours, but it was already too late. A copy was made, passed between seekers, psychologists, and rogue coders. That copy is the one you're about to experience. Not a rumor, not a myth. A file designed to wake up the self you lost in childhood and can never unsee again. The mirror file isn't just an experience, it's a map. Hidden beneath the verbal triggers and silence gaps was a blueprint of the self, a sequence of internal events every subject unknowingly followed. The same pattern. Every time. First came resistance. The brain fought back, trying to keep its guardrails intact. Then, disruption. The loops bypassed conscious logic and hit the emotional core directly. And then, the drop. Memory convergence. That's when it happened. Forgotten events resurfaced, not as stories, but as sensations. One subject began smelling the hallway of his childhood home. Another felt the heat of a car seat from the day his father left. These weren't thoughts. They were downloads, raw, untamed, unedited. Then came the final stage, reconstruction. The subject begins reassembling a self that was never allowed to fully form. Not the fake identity shaped by pain, not the mask built for social survival, but the original mind print, the core self that existed before the betrayal, before the shame, before the world convinced you that hiding was safer than honesty. What the file truly reveals is that most people never lived as themselves. They lived as fragments, as echoes of unmet expectations. But underneath all the scars, silence, and social programming, There is a version of you that remembers, not how to cope, but how to be. And when that version surfaces, even for a second, you will feel two things: an unbearable grief and an unshakable power. Because now you'll know what was stolen, and worse, how much of your life was lived by someone else. That's what they didn't want spreading, not information, but recognition. What actually happens when you experience the protocol? The mirror file doesn't start like a guided meditation. It doesn't soothe you. It doesn't ask you to relax. It begins with engineered silence, a specific frequency designed to raise cognitive friction. You won't even notice it at first, but within minutes your breathing changes. Then it begins. A voice, steady, neutral, not human, not robotic, something in between. It doesn't teach, it doesn't explain, it asks, what is the thing you never forgave yourself for? Who did you become to survive? What truth would destroy you if you said it out loud? These aren't questions, they're keys. At first you resist. Your mind throws up noise, rationalizations, memories, excuses. But the file is built to wait. Around the 12-minute mark, the voice loops back, but this time, it repeats your own language from earlier in the session. Words you didn't even realize you said out loud. That's when it hits. A shift in temperature, the tightening in your chest. Your mind starts surfacing things. Old sounds, smells, a hallway you haven't seen in 20 years. You're not remembering, you're reliving. Some cry, some laugh, some freeze. One user said, "It didn't feel like I was going back. It felt like it was coming forward." By minute 30, the voice quiets. There's a low tone in the background, subtle, constant. It's designed to hold your focus just long enough for the memory integration to begin. This is the real moment, the moment you stop being a story and start being a witness. You don't feel healed, you feel revealed. And by the time the final question comes, the one no one ever forgets, do you recognize who's been watching your life from the inside? You will, because the answer will no longer be, "I don't know." It'll be, "Yes, it was me, all along." They never warned you about what comes next, because even the people who tested it didn't stay the same afterward. The mirror file doesn't end when the recording stops. It ends when you stop pretending. The moment the voice fades, there's silence, but it's not peace. It's stillness. The kind you feel in a room right after something breaks. And something did. A belief, a mask, a loop that ran your life so quietly you didn't even know it existed. Until now. In the hours that follow, most people describe a kind of emotional vertigo. You're walking, talking, functioning, but your perception feels dislocated. Time slows. Ordinary things seem louder. Faces seem different. That's the defragging. Your mind, for the first time, is no longer held hostage by its survival script. And now it's sorting through the rubble, trying to rebuild something real. Some report lucid dreams that feel more truthful than memory. Others speak of flashbacks not in images, but in sensory details. The smell of a room, the weight of a stair, the sound of a door closing in childhood. There's a reason. Your body stores what your mind refuses to carry. Tears come, laughter comes, rage, confusion, stillness. It's not emotional chaos, it's emotional restoration. But the most profound after effect is this: hyperclarity. Suddenly you see the code, the exact phrase your parent used that made you start apologizing for existing. The moment a teacher rolled their eyes and your voice began shrinking. The first time you decided being likable was safer than being honest. You start catching yourself right before the performance begins. You feel the old version rise, and you choose not to wear it. That's the shift. Not healing, reclaiming, and from that point forward, everything changes. What you tolerate, who you trust, how you walk, what you will never again allow in your presence. People will say, "You've changed," but you'll know the truth. You didn't change. You just returned. They didn't bury it because it was dangerous. They buried it because it was liberating. And a liberated mind is the most unprofitable thing in the world. See, the mirror file didn't just help people feel better. It shattered their emotional addictions. The addiction to being liked. The addiction to approval. The addiction to asking for permission just to be themselves. That's the real threat. Not violence, not rebellion, sovereignty. Because a person who no longer needs to be fixed stops buying solutions. A person who sees through their own emotional programming stops performing for systems that exploit it. They become still, focused, unshakable. You can't manipulate someone who sees the strings. You can't sell fear to someone who's met the root of it. And that's why this protocol had to disappear. Because if people realized that 1 hour could do what 10 years of soft lies couldn't, the whole structure, the therapy mills, the pharmaceutical machines, the self-help empires, would start to crack. People would stop idolizing gurus and start listening to their own suppressed voices. They'd stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What part of me believed I couldn't?" The mirror file didn't create chaos. It revealed it. It showed that the prison was never out there. It was coded into you. And if enough people unlocked that, not through rage, but through awareness, the game would be over. Not with riots, but with awakening. That's the nightmare they couldn't risk. A population that doesn't just question authority, but stops needing it altogether. Because someone who has remembered who they are doesn't go back to sleep. You've come this far. And maybe you're wondering, what now? Because something in you already shifted. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Enough that you can't unknow what you now feel. You've seen the mirror. You've glimpsed what you buried. And the silence you once called peace now feels more like a cage. You're standing on a psychological edge where most people hesitate. This is where they turn back. They say, "That was interesting." Scroll to the next video and return to the loop. Back to distraction. Back to emotional autopilot. Back to the version of themselves they no longer believe in, but still wear. And that's their right. Because awakening is a violent mercy. It burns illusions. It kills comfort. It makes you responsible for everything you used to blame others for. So let's be clear. This is not for everyone. This isn't motivation. This isn't mindset coaching. This is identity resurrection. You won't be able to talk to people the same way. You won't laugh at the same things. You won't tolerate noise, fake smiles, pointless conversations, or emotional cowardice. You'll feel the weight of truth in every room. You'll hear the programming in people's words. And you'll carry a quiet anger at the years you lost playing a role you never chose. That's the cost. But here's the reward. You stop performing. You stop pleasing. You stop apologizing for your depth. And people will feel it. In your silence, in your eye contact, in your refusal to shrink when the world demands your obedience. The mirror file was never just a tool. It was a threshold, and now it's offering you a choice. Go back to comfort and forget what you touched, or step over the line and become what you were always meant to be. Not better, not stronger, real. If you're still here, it means something inside you didn't flinch. Or maybe it did, but you kept listening anyway. That part of you? That's the one we've been speaking to all along. Not the voice in your head, not the performance you perfected, but the presence beneath it. The one who's been watching your life unfold. Quietly. Patiently. Waiting for permission to return. You don't need more information. You don't need another podcast, another mentor, another book on how to become who you already are. You need a choice, and here it is. Clear, raw, irreversible. Cross the line. What does that mean? It means you no longer seek peace through performance. You don't tolerate conversations that insult your soul. You don't keep people around because of shared history, if they suffocate your future. You no longer abandon your truth just to keep fragile egos comfortable. You accept the grief of waking up. The grief of realizing how much of your life was lived on mute. You begin to rebuild. Not as the version you curated for others, but as the unfiltered signal that was always underneath the noise. It will cost you things. Comfort, small talk, the approval of the emotionally average. You will outgrow people. You will be called intense. You will be misunderstood. And then one day, you will walk into a room and realize you're not performing. You're not adjusting. You're not explaining. You are just present. And the air shifts because of it. This is what the mirror file was really about. Not healing, not therapy, not even truth. It was about return. The return of the sovereign. The return of the witness. The return of the self. And once you cross, there is no applause. No badge. No external proof. Just a stillness, an internal click, a recognition. You'll walk differently. You'll listen differently. You'll look at people and you'll see who's wearing a mask, who's still asleep, who's never met their own voice. And without saying a word, you'll become a mirror for others. Some will avoid you, some will hate you, and some will follow you, not because you asked them to, but because something in you reminds them of who they used to be. And when they ask, "What happened to you?" you'll say nothing. You'll just look them in the eyes, and they'll understand. The file didn't change you. It revealed what never left. Welcome back.